Everyone at school saw this kid as a total loser, but one day, everything changed. He couldn't believe the power surging through him. His body was so strong, he was actually scared of going bald. He shattered the school's running record and did the same with the push-up test. For the weightlifting portion, there simply wasn't enough weight for him to lift. All the other students were just watching, absolutely terrified. This was the kid they used to pick on. He wasn't supposed to be this strong. If I'd known, I would have never messed with him. But the truth is, things used to be so different. He was the only one who'd failed the passer exam. While the whole class celebrated their success, Kanagi Manato just felt a hollow emptiness inside. It was the third time he had failed. He was the student left behind to clean the entire classroom. This moment alone almost made him cry, realizing just how useless he felt. Then one of his classmates told him all the students needed to head to the school entrance. The reason. This guy, Hisaki Kai's, a famous A-rank hunter. He actually used to be a student at this school before he became a famous hunter. He was back to film a documentary about how he was supposedly a great student before his fame. But the real story. Off camera was something very different. Hisaki Kai's was a terrible person and used to beat up Manato every day for no reason. Remembering that guy made Manato tremble. But in front of the cameras, Hisaki Kai's claimed that Manato was a great friend who always helped him study. And even helped him out with money, since Manato's family was poor. These lies were just to make Hisaki Kai's look even better for the cameras. And since Manato didn't have the courage, he just went along with Hisaki's lies. As reporters snapped photos, Manato felt those old memories burn inside him. He really hated this guy. After the filming was over, our protagonist felt that old emptiness of being weak, of not having any power to change things. When he was younger, Manato loved reading books that told stories about the legendary founders who had saved the world. When the Tower of Malevolence appeared and nearly destroyed humanity with all the monsters pouring from it, incredible heroes emerged to save the world. They were all amazing. One defeated 10,000 soldiers with just a wooden stick. It could have easily been a pencil, a mage so powerful she could cast spells without uttering a single word. This was over a century ago, and now they are legends. When a special mark appears on your body, you have the potential to awaken and become powerful and famous. But unfortunately, Manato had failed the test 3 times. His dream was crushed. But before leaving, Hisaki Kai's went back to Manato and said he had convinced the association to let Manato retake the test. He just had to go to the founder's sanctuary later to meet him. This left our protagonist confused. The guy was a jerk, but if he did this to boost his own public image, it didn't matter. As long as Manato got a second chance, he was absolutely going to take it. Later, at the founder's mausoleum, the cameras were rolling for the final scene. The shot focused on Hisaki standing before the historic tomb, delivering some grand speech. After the interview finally wraps up, the reporters thank him, happy with the footage they captured. Hisaki plays the polite celebrity, saying he can't wait to see the article. But the moment they're gone, he heads deeper into the mausoleum. Where his men are digging away, find the entrance yet, he asks. They eagerly point to a hidden passage, asking if this is the spot. Been searching for, but then a voice calls out from behind. When Manato arrived expecting to retake an exam, he caught these guys in the act. For him, this place was sacred. It held the memories of the people he admired most. When he tries to stop these looters, Hisaki Kai's decks him with all the force an A-rank awakened could muster. The punch was absolutely brutal, and Manato felt something inside him just shatter. The thugs yelled that they had grabbed everything of value from inside the tomb. Manato felt like he was on the verge of death. But even then, all he could think about was how wrong this was. They couldn't steal this. Hisaki Kai's then grabs Manato, saying he knows everything about the kid, the weakest student. Obsessed with the ancestors. Always living in the library reading books. His perfect plan was to throw our hero into the river behind the sanctuary and pin the blame on him for opening the founder's tomb. The punch Manato took earlier was meant to be a fatal blow. As they tossed him into the water, he had absolutely no strength left. As he sank, he remembered all the days he had trained, how hard he'd studied to achieve his dream, and how it was all for nothing. Then, at the bottom of the lake, lights lit up around him. Despite the freezing water, a comforting warmth radiated from them. Minato heard them say he was the chosen vessel for this generation. Turns out, heroic spirits were sealed right here. In Minato's hand, the Crest of Nothingness appeared. It gave its bearer no power, however. Whoever held it could actually possess the spirit of any founder. Minato now had to choose which one of the heroes he would form a contract with. Magic, endurance, swordsmanship, spear arts, any of them. But the protagonist then shouted that he chose every single one. He wanted all their powers. The heroes said it doesn't work that way, but they were all sucked into the mark. Every soul was pulled inside the seal. Meanwhile, Hizaki and his friends were still near the lake when they heard a massive explosion from the water. By some miracle, one of the guys actually had an umbrella with him. The three couldn't believe the guy floating before them was Manato, the same loser they had just killed. When our hero landed in front of them, his expression was completely different, but they just insulted him again, saying not even cockroaches were that resilient. A nearby stick seemed to catch our protagonist's eye. The two guys just laughed at him. You're going to fight with a stick, you think you're John Wick. Manato wasn't fazed and just kept testing out his new moves. Then Hizaki said in a serious tone, you two need to make sure he doesn't leave the bottom of that lake again. One of his goons then drew his sword and promised to throw Manato back into the water himself. But when the guy attacked with his sword, several cuts appeared in a single second. The thug couldn't even see it, only felt it as his body started to fall to pieces. Hizaki and the other guy couldn't believe the scene before them. This couldn't be the same weakling from before. The chubby guy cast his most powerful spell. Manato was known for having 0 mana, so he'd be destroyed by this. But our protagonist simply pointed his finger. And without a word, a lightning bolt slammed down on the spot. It wasn't hard to hit since the target was so big. Even so, Hizaki was stunned. That was definitely a spell cast without any chant. And that sword movement was like the legendary sword Saint himself was standing right in front of him. This magic was like something the legendary mages of old could do. What Hizaki couldn't grasp was that all 106 founders were now inside Manato. The protagonist declared that a new name would be written in the history books, and Hizaki would also be remembered. But as the first evil to be destroyed by the great Kanagi Manato. As he approaches, Hizaki can only watch in horror, finally accepting the impossible truth. The boy he abandoned had just absorbed the souls of the founders through the Crest of Nothingness. Inside Kanagi's mind, the founders were going absolutely wild. After centuries of being sealed, they were reveling in their new freedom and already fighting over who gets to control their new body first. Amidst the chaos, the legendary swordsman Hine Reichu speaks to Kanagi, remarking casually that he's not surprised the boy remembers his name. He asks Kanagi for a plan, brushing Hizaki off as a complete nobody and pointing to a much bigger threat right behind him. Vogest. Kanagi turns to face Hizaki, who's just stammering in fear, trying to boast about being an A-rank hunter. Kanagi doesn't even waste a word. He just throws a single punch that sends Hizaki flying. Kanagi then shifts his focus to the mysterious bag, which is practically glowing with a dark aura. As he watches it, a massive surge of power erupts from inside, catching him totally by surprise. Hinoi, however, just watches calmly with a slight smile on his face. Meanwhile, back in the city, a monstrous three-headed wolf is on a total rampage. A man shouts for someone named Kisaragi to handle it. Without wasting a second, Kisaragi leaps into action. With incredible grace, he gets above the beast and brings his sword down in a waterfall impact attack, defeating the A-rank monster in one clean blow. The crowd goes wild, cheering for the S-rank hunter. Kisaragi humbly thanks them before asking where Hizaki is. One man says Hizaki is probably busy, with an interview remarking how nice it must be to be called the young hope. Kisaragi just shrugs it off, noting that Hizaki's fame is good for their guild's reputation. But just as they're about to leave, a terrifying pressure wave washes over the entire city. Panic erupts as civilians and even low-rank hunters collapse. Kisaragi sees his own teammates struggling, realizing that even A and B-rank hunters can't withstand it. He knows instantly an S-rank monster has appeared. This immense pressure is flowing from the founder's mausoleum. Back in the forest, a terrified Hizaki struggles back to his feet, staring in horror as a colossal monster crawls right out of the bag. He stammers, "Is that a demon? What is that thing?" Kanagi explains that by stealing the relics, Hizaki broke the seal that was holding back one of the tower's original boss monsters. Inside Kanagi's mind, Hino analyzes the beast with an expert's eye. He recognizes it immediately as the embodiment of emptiness, a creature far beyond S-rank. According to him, its poisonous aura alone can kill thousands, and monsters like this were all too common back in his day. This is too much for Hizaki. He completely loses it and bolts. He's convinced that staying one more second means certain death. But Kanagi knows a predator's instincts. He warns that running will only get him killed faster. But it's too late. The second Hizaki moves, the monster strikes with terrifying speed, shooting a massive tentacle right at him. He barely gets his sword up before the tentacle impales him, piercing straight through his chest. The same sword that once killed a dragon is completely useless now. The creature's tendrils spread across Hizaki's body, draining his life force as his screams echo through the forest. Kanagi, however, just watches, knowing this was inevitable. As the former hero dies, Hinoi's spirit places a hand on Kanagi's shoulder. "Want to see my one-handed sword style?" He proposes, making a play for complete control of the body. Before Kanagi can even answer, the other founders jump in, grabbing Hinoi by the hair and accusing him of trying to hog their powerful new vessel. But it's Kanagi himself who stops the bickering. He lays down his own terms. No single founder gets control. His body is to be shared among all of them. He declares that one day he will surpass every single one of them, and he'll prove his worth through strength. If they want to use his body, they'll have to show him what real power looks like. Stunned by his sheer audacity, Hino just grins and readies his blade. Seizing the moment, Hinoi takes the first step, merging his consciousness with Kanagi's and urging the others to follow. As Hinoi's spirit lifts his sword, Kanagi's body mirrors the movement, targeting the monster's limbs. Guided by one of the founder's expertise, the blade severs a massive arm in a single, clean strike. The beast retaliates with a furious swing. But Kanagi's body, now infused with another founder's agility, dodges with inhuman speed. Power layers upon power as the spirits take turns, one granting him the strength to catch the creature's own tentacles and slam it violently into the ground. The monster is sent reeling as Kanagi snatches a bow, piercing its hide with arrows. He then unleashes a barrage of skills, whirlwinds, fire breath, and ice attacks. As the beast tries a sneak attack from below, Kanagi's eyes flash yellow. The great wizard inside him takes over, zapping the creature with lightning. Then with a final powerful leap, Kanagi soars above the monster. Hinoi takes control, grabs Hizaki's broken sword, and executes his signature one-handed technique, the Jurutakai wave-cutting blade. The sword slices the demon clean in half, ending its rampage. As the two halves fall, a victorious smile finally spreads across Kanagi's face. Watching the entire battle from a nearby tree is a single raven. Elsewhere in the city, a man standing atop a skyscraper answers a call, shocked to hear the monster was defeated before he even got there. He asks if any strong hunters were on the scene. But the voice on the other end says their footage from the Raven shows it was an academy student who took it down. The man, Chihara Midori, the world's strongest awakened, says he wants to meet this student. The next morning, Midori is sitting on a pile of monster corpses when he calls the academy's director. He tells him about the S-rank monster, clarifying that he wasn't the one who beat it. According to the Raven's footage, it was Kanagi Manato. Midori finds this hard to believe, especially since Kanagi is known for failing the hunter exam 3 years straight. He then asks the director for a special favor. Back at the academy, the students are all talking about what happened. That terrifying aura from the day before left most of them paralyzed. And now they're all guessing who could have possibly defeated such a monster. Meanwhile, Kanagi stumbles across campus, leaning on a stick, his whole body trembling. He overhears their chatter, amazed that the whole incident has already become the talk of the school. Suddenly, some guy slams right into him, knocking him down and scoffing at the idea that a weakling like him could be the S-rank slayer. Kanagi knows the truth. He did beat the demon, but only by letting the founders use his body, and now he's paying the price. The recoil from their power is agonizing. As he struggles to get up, a voice mocks him in his mind. It's Hinoi, reminding him of his big promise to surpass them. With a challenging but encouraging tone, Hinoi pushes him to get himself together. Kanagi remembers his vow and ignoring the pain. He forces himself back to his feet, quietly reaffirming his goal. Hinoi just chuckles inside him, urging him to show some resolve. The spirit then scans the nearby students with a sigh of disappointment. The awakeners of this era seem no stronger than regular humans, a far cry from the warriors he knew. He thinks that if the tower reappeared now, the world would be doomed. But his thoughts are cut short when he senses an incredibly powerful aura nearby. Kanagi feels Hinoi's sudden tension, but the spirit just brushes it off. Just then, a professor shouts for Kanagi to come over. Assuming it's about his expulsion letter, he approaches with caution. After all, he failed 3 times and there are no more chances, but to his shock, the professor tells him to head to the field for a re-examination. The news leaves Kanagi stunned. The other students crowd the windows, whispering with excitement. No one has ever been given a hunter re-examination before. On the field, Kanagi gets into a sprinter's stance. He's not fully recovered, but he is determined. The first test is a 100-meter sprint. The student who knocked him down earlier starts trash-talking again, calling him a failure. But as the test begins, everyone watches in stunned silence as Kanagi crosses the finish line in just 1.2 seconds, smashing the old record of 2.7. Next up is the 30,000-meter run. He finishes in 1 minute and 17 seconds, obliterating the previous record. It's the same story for every other test, push-ups, bench press, you name it. He doesn't just break the records, he more than doubles them. The students are left completely speechless. Kanagi himself wonders if the founders are secretly helping, but Hinoi assures him this is all his own power. Meanwhile, in the headmaster's office, Midori is looking over Kanagi's file. The headmaster admits that while Kanagi's new physical scores are unbelievable, the real issue has always been his magic. For 3 years, every single assessment has shown his mana levels to be 0, totally undetectable. It's the reason he was always considered a hopeless case. Midori's secretary just smirks, hinting that things might be about to get interesting. Out on the field, Kanagi stands before the final test. Magic measurement, the professor explains he needs to channel his mana into a huge fan and make it spin for 30 seconds. The record is 4,022 rotations. As Kanagi prepares, he's hit with memories of failing the same test, year after year. No matter how much effort he'd put in before, the fan never so much as trembled. It was always his inability to sense mana that held him back. But this time is different. For the first time, he can actually feel it coursing through him, starting in his right foot, spiraling through his body, and circling back. He recognizes that his breathing can regulate and speed up the flow, allowing him to unleash the energy from his right palm. As the professor signals the start, Kanagi releases his mana. Instantly, the fan explodes into motion at an astonishing speed. The counting machine can't even keep up with the rapid acceleration. And the sheer force of the wind makes it impossible for anyone to even see the numbers. The velocity climbs beyond anything expected. Before anyone can react, the machine explodes. The fan, now completely free, shoots across the field like a massive blade. Students cry out in alarm as it hurtles toward the main building, crashing right into the headmaster's office with a deafening boom. Inside, the headmaster barely dodges the incoming debris, collapsing from the absolute shock of the event. Midori's secretary, stunned by the spectacle, can't even process what just happened. Meanwhile, Midori, unfazed by the chaos, just chuckles. To him, the resemblance between Kanagi's power and his own is undeniable. According to Midori, only one other person before Kanagi had ever produced a score that was immeasurable, and that person was him. The professor, still trying to make sense of what he just saw, declares that Kanagi has passed the hunter examination. A wave of excitement rips through the students as they erupt into cheers. Not only did Kanagi shatter every record, he completely surpassed all expectations. Staring at his own hands, Kanagi trembles in total disbelief. He had spent years believing he was incapable of using magic. Yet the power had been inside him all along. From the sidelines, Hino watches the scene, quietly satisfied. He had expected an outcome just like this. Meanwhile, Kanagi knows everything has just changed. By giving his body to the founders, he has unlocked the dormant potential that was hidden within him this entire time. Hino can't help but laugh, thinking to himself that this boy is far from ordinary. With the crest of nothingness marking his fate, it's as if he's been waiting for this very moment for more than a century. Before he can dwell on the thought, a crushing presence descends upon them, sending a shock wave through the air. The sheer force of it leaves him speechless for a moment. His mind scrambles to process the explosion of power. But Hin instantly recognizes the massive aura. It's the same one he sensed earlier that morning. Standing before him, seemingly formed from the pressure itself, is the legendary Midori. Kanagi is shocked to see him, knowing he's the strongest hunter in existence. As Midori lands, he starts addressing him directly. Midori congratulates him on his performance in the hunter examination, offering words of recognition, but Kanagi is so stunned he can barely respond. Then Midori throws down a new challenge before him, an additional test. Midori wants Kanagi to land just a single hit on him, the world's strongest hunter. Hearing that, Kanagi is frozen in shock for a moment. Midori, 23 years old, a man who earned the title of a full-fledged hunter at the mere age of 9, now stands before him. His feats are legendary, unmatched by anyone. In history, he has turned thousands of demons to ash in mere moments. His power is so overwhelming that other hunters don't even dare to stand against him. 10 years ago, he single-handedly wiped out the Pandemonium outbreak. And 5 years prior, he subdued the Kyushu outbreak. The man is a living singularity. As Midori explains his challenge, Kanagi is left in total disbelief. However, Hinu is thrilled, urging Kanagi to surrender his body to him right away. Yet Midori explained the conditions in the simplest terms. Kanagi had 1 minute to strike him. Whether he succeeded or failed, there would be no consequences. Midori himself would only attack once every 10 seconds, making sure that the challenge stayed fair. There was no reason to hesitate, no room for doubt. Any skill, any weapon was fair game for Kanagi, while Midori would hold back from using any of his own. To prove he was serious, Midori summoned a vast arsenal of weapons, giving Kanagi the choice of anything he wanted. The sight of so many legendary weapons, appearing in an instant, only added to the surreal nature of the challenge. Kanagi's thoughts were a total mess. He realized he was about to fight the famous Midori, one-on-one. And still unsure, he hesitated before finally asking if he was truly free to use any weapon. In response, Midori casually picked up a katana, his grip light but assured. With almost no effort, he sliced the blade clean in half as if it were nothing more than a dry twig. He then stated without the slightest hint of arrogance that his own body surpassed the sharpness of any blade. Kanagi barely had time to process this display before Hinoi's impatience flared. You could hear the frustration in his voice as he demanded to take over. Unable to tolerate Midori's insane confidence, his anger finally boiled over as he declared that such words from Midori were absolutely unforgivable. Kanagi could feel Hinoi's energy surging, his presence growing stronger as if he was ready to unleash his full strength. It dawned on him in that moment that Midori's power was on the same level as the founders themselves. Against that level of strength, he had no real chance of victory. Yet, even as that realization sunk in, he knew there was no time to hesitate. Meanwhile, all the students were gathering around to watch the fight. Without warning, Midori started the countdown. A slight smile played on his lips as he signaled the start of the test. Kanagi grabs his sword and charges at Midori, determined to attack. Hino questions if he really intends to fight alone, insisting that it's not fair. But Kanagi just ignores him and continues his assault. Despite knowing his efforts are futile, he believes that to become a legend, he must rely on his own strength, not borrow power from the founders. He swings his sword at Midori, but Midori effortlessly dodges with minimal movement. Even as Kanagi swings relentlessly, Midori is still just on his phone, casually asking about his social media and saying this whole incident will definitely get recorded and go viral. The students just watch, stunned, amazed that Midori can dodge every single attack without even taking this seriously. Kanagi keeps up the assault, but one student spots something odd about his form. Watching closely, they see Kanagi lift his sword, feinting a vertical slash before quickly switching to a horizontal strike aimed at Midori's feet and throat. The execution is perfect, and Kanagi can't believe how naturally his body is moving. He realizes he's not tiring and wonders if this is the effect of borrowing the founder's immense power. But his train of thought is cut short when Midori puts a finger to his head, getting ready to flick him while mentioning that 10 seconds have passed. Kanagi barely dodges, but the force Midori unleashes completely obliterates the field. Staring at the wreckage, Kanagi knows that if that attack had actually landed, his head would have been blown clean off. Midori looks at his own hand, confused. He senses no real malice from Kanagi and wonders if he misjudged his own strength. Pure panic hits Kanagi as he realizes he's going to die at this rate. Desperately, he tries to remember the feeling of his stronger self. As he concentrates, a powerful aura erupts, catching Midori off guard. Kanagi attacks again, his speed increasing exponentially. The students are in awe, yelling that the camera can't even follow their movements anymore. Midori senses the change in Kanagi and wonders if there's a special condition to activate this power, or if Kanagi is just hiding it on purpose. Realizing another 10 seconds have gone by, Midori decides to go a little easier on Kanagi this time. He bends, setting up another flick, but this time he hits Kanagi in the chest, sending him flying backwards into the wall. Kanagi spits blood, but he finds the whole experience incredible. He's amazed he's fighting the world's strongest awakened, and knows that if his body was the same as yesterday, he would already be dead from that single blow. The thought actually makes him smile, because it means he's getting stronger. But he also knows his current skills aren't nearly enough to pass Midori's test. Determined, he decides to just push forward with brute force, charging at Midori yet again. Suddenly, Midori is right beside him, impossibly fast, making Kanagi freeze. Apologizing, Midori tells him he has seen enough. He then adds that the 30 seconds are up before chopping Kanagi on the neck, causing him to slowly lose consciousness. As he collapses, Midori notes that the kid is a genius, but not on the same level as his comrades. In the end, Kanagi couldn't fully unleash the power Midori had sensed. He calls his secretary, telling her they should head back, clearly disappointed with how things turned out. Just then, Kanagi's hand grips his sword, and Midori feels an intense aura from behind him. He looks back to see Kanagi's body just radiating with power. Hino, now speaking through Kanagi, says that the stubborn kid is finally asleep, which means he can finally take over. He steps forward. Hinoi suggests they keep this fight going a little longer. Meanwhile, Kanagi's spirit, separated from his body, freaks out watching Hino control it. But Midori just smiles, recognizing the presence he'd sensed earlier. He wonders if this is a completely different person or just some new skill. Either way, he knows one thing for sure: Kanagi is a monster now. Under Hinoi's control, he suddenly attacks, yelling at Midori not to zone out. Midori immediately sees that his movements have changed. His speed and strength are on a whole other level. Suddenly, a sword flashes at Midori's face, and he ducks just in the nick of time. Kanagi swings again, forcing Midori to leap back and make some space. Still in shock, Midori watches Kanagi quickly get his sword ready for another strike. He attacks once more, but Midori bends down just in time, making the attack hit the building behind him. The students inside scramble in a panic, finally realizing the danger. Midori notices Kanagi's slashes are more unpredictable, but he can still predict the flow of his movements. It's like something out of ancient swordsmanship, like a raging, relentless torrent of water. Raising a hand, Midori laughs, saying this is the kind of skill it takes to beat an S-rank like him. He then lifts his hand again, planning to put Kanagi to sleep again, noting only 40 seconds have passed. However, Kanagi shoots forward at an incredible speed, swinging his sword and screaming that Midori won't be able to touch him. Midori quickly jumps back to dodge the blow, laughing while admitting Kanagi's skill is impressive. The students can't believe what they're seeing as Midori is forced on the defensive. Kanagi shouts that Midori is being boring and insists that he stop holding back. He warns Midori that if he keeps underestimating him, he's going to get hurt. Without hesitating, Kanagi leaps forward again, but Midori just laughs and agrees. With a swift kick, Midori sends a stone flying towards the weapons behind him. Instantly, the weapons all float into the air. He jumps, catching Kanagi off guard and grabbing one of the weapons hovering above them. Excited, Kanagi yells that Midori is finally getting serious. They launch into a crazy mid-air battle, their feet clashing against each other, stunning the students who are watching in awe. They grab every weapon they can reach, shattering them to bits with their raw power. Meanwhile, inside Kanagi's mind, the founders are watching Hinu go all out. They're impressed that Midori is actually able to keep up. The old man spirit suggests they join the fight, but another founder scolds him, calling him tactless. The great wizard, watching quietly, suddenly realizes that Kanagi has been studying Hinoi's movements, trying to learn his techniques. He notices Hino shift his center of gravity as he attacks from below, but the sword in his hands shatters again. Frustrated by the cheap quality of the weapons, Hinoi starts getting angry. Midori, on the other hand, is having a blast. He finds the whole battle exhilarating. But then he realizes there are no swords left and wonders if Kanagi will pull out a gun next. With a taunting smirk, Midori shouts that only 10 seconds are left and asks what Hinoi plans to do now. Hinoi just glances toward the building behind him. Leaping toward it, he goes straight for the man who shoved Kanagi a moment ago and yanks his sword away. Instantly, Midori jumps in close, launching a powerful fist aimed at Hinoi. The impact slams into the building, causing a huge explosion. Luckily, Hinoi dodges just in time and instantly reappears in front of Midori. They start trading blows in midair again. Midori just grins and shouts that this fight is a blast and says they should keep it up. Meanwhile, the students notice the entire building is about to come crashing down. As the fight reaches the rooftop, Midori's secretary just watches calmly. Then Midori places his hand on a huge fan and grips it, causing cracks to spread all over its surface. He rips the fan right out of the building and aims it straight at Hino. With a powerful throw, he sends it flying right at him, but he's totally surprised when Hino, using just his one-handed sword, slices clean through the massive fan with his unique dice-style sword art. The fan just explodes into tiny pieces, and Midori just gets excited, praising Hino's amazing skill. Hino doesn't hesitate, though, and hurls his sword directly at Midori. But to his complete shock, the sword shatters on impact. Midori raises a hand, aiming it at him, and calmly states that 60 seconds have passed, just before striking Hino with an open palm, sending him crashing to the ground below. Hino curses his breath. But before he can even move, Kanagi suddenly leaps onto his back and shoves him back towards the other founders. As Midori's attack closes in, Kanagi actually manages to push it aside with a gentle move, successfully avoiding the strike. This unexpected move leaves both Hino and Midori completely speechless. However, the force of the impact breaks one of Kanagi's hands. But despite that, he remains completely focused and throws a punch straight at Midori's face with his one good hand. From their point of view, the fight between the singularities seems endless. It's a fierce clash over a tiny outcome, just like a chess game where the two players are perfectly matched. For all its intensity, Hino knows it only lasted for a moment. He watches with a quiet pride, realizing that Kanagi has just forged a new path to victory. Kanagi himself, however, is left in total shock when he sees Midori stop his fist just in time. He's so frustrated realizing he failed to land a single clean hit, but then something surprising happens. Midori smiles and intentionally pulls Kanagi's fist right into his own face, recognizing the effort. Then, without missing a beat, he confirms that Kanagi has passed. Before another word is said, both of them collapse onto the ground. The students who were watching just murmur in complete confusion, trying to figure out what they just saw. Midori, still holding onto Kanagi's unconscious body, calls out to his secretary, Ren, and tells her that it's time to go. Ren appears beside him and asks him what happened. Midori confirms that Kanagi passed, admitting that he finds him pretty interesting. He does admit, however, that he accidentally broke Kanagi's arm and then asks Ren to please heal him. She agrees without a second thought. The students, overhearing all of this, can hardly believe that Kanagi actually succeeded. So, the realization finally hits them, and cheers erupt all over, celebrating that Kanagi had managed to land a punch on Midori. All the noise stirs Kanagi awake, and while Ren starts to heal his arm, she warns him not to move, so he does. He thanks her, and she congratulates him for passing the test. Kanagi is still in disbelief, sitting up abruptly and questioning if he actually managed to land a hit on Midori. Before he can even process that, Midori suddenly appears right beside him, amused by his reaction. Without dwelling on the moment, Midori just says that a pass is a pass. He admits he started taking the battle seriously midway through his combo. Midori then goes on to praise Kanagi's skill, impressed by his ability to dodge his strongest attack and his incredible movements. He tells Kanagi he should be proud of his achievement. Kanagi, getting a hold of himself, accepts the praise. Without hesitation, he immediately asks about the next step, eager to know what comes after passing. His question leaves Ren a little puzzled as she turns towards Midori, who looks just as lost for an answer. Later that night, Kanagi was home helping his mom clean up while she cooked. She casually asked how many guests were coming. Kanagi wasn't sure, so he just guessed one. His mom then reflects on the day, saying it had been a huge deal. Not only did Kanagi pass the hunter's exam, he even got Midori's attention. She tells him she's always been confident in his abilities, believing he could do anything if he just tried hard enough. Kanagi listens quietly, appreciating her words. But then his mom's expression changes. She gets worried about such a famous person visiting, joking that people might think their home is a doghouse. Kanagi, exasperated, quickly brushes the comment off. He insists Midori isn't the type to judge stuff like that. Once he finishes his chores and helps his mom, he finally crashes onto his bed. But his mind is still reeling from the day's events. His eyes land on the card Midori had given him, and he feels a surge of uncertainty. He starts wondering why Midori hadn't thought the situation through more. His mind flashes back to the battlefield from earlier that day, remembering when Ren took Midori down and twisted his leg. He clearly remembers Midori's scream of pain when Ren confronted him. Right then, Midori had reminded Kanagi of something he'd said earlier, suggesting Kanagi agreed to be one of his comrades if they won. Confused, Kanagi denied ever saying anything of the sort. Ren, getting even more agitated, just tightened her grip on Midori's leg. Midori told Kanagi there were too many people watching and suggested he come over to his house that night to talk everything over properly. He promised to explain the choices they had and to reveal their true enemies. Kanagi wondered who these enemies could possibly be. He knew the founders already destroyed the tower, and that the hunters were just supposed to take out monsters that escaped the dimensional crack. He wondered if there was some other reason, but soon drifted off. Suddenly, Hinox's shouting jolts him awake. He sees Hin and the founders all gathered in his room. Confused, he asks why they're there and what's going on, but Hinui just says they were discussing something and had only just finished. Still puzzled, Kanagi instinctively pulls the covers over himself and worriedly asks if they've decided who gets his body. Before Hinu could answer, the doorbell rings. Apologizing, Kanagi figures it's Midori and suggests they talk later. He walks to the door. It's dark and he felt a chill. Then, to his horror, he saw his mom collapsed on the floor. Panic set in. He cried out her name, rushing to her side, but stopped dead when he saw someone sitting in his kitchen. The stranger was just eating the food his mom had made, even complimenting it, all while ignoring the total mess around him. With a sneer, the man told Kanagi he needed to discipline his mother. He even insisted that if Kanagi wanted to impress customers, they would need to get better quality food. Kanagi immediately demanded to know who he was and what he'd done to his mom. The guy didn't even blink. Just yelled at Kanagi to watch his tone, then introduced himself as Hitani Goru, an S-rank hunter and a comrade of Midori. Hitani then told Kanagi to grab his luggage, saying they were moving to their base. Rage boiled inside Kanagi. Without thinking, he threw a punch at Hitani, but the man easily dodged it and suddenly appeared behind him, asking if Kanagi was challenging him. Kanagi stayed silent, remembering his mom's words. She promised she'd raise him alone with pride after his dad passed. He remembered the worn-out shoes she always insisted on wearing, telling him to buy new sneakers instead. He also remembered her, congratulating him just a bit earlier and promising his favorite tonkatsu for dinner. With new determination, Kanagi glared at Hitani and demanded what he had done to his mom. Watching this, Hinui realized Hitani was an S-rank hunter from the old days. Hinui was annoyed by this guy, who he thought was just a ripoff of Midori, and decided to act. The founders who'd seen Kanagi's fight with Midori now knew exactly how they should handle him. Hitani, amused, just taunted Kanagi, saying his angry face was actually pretty cute. He raised his hand to slap Kanagi, but our boy stood perfectly still, completely unfazed. As the hand came down, Kanagi effortlessly caught Hitani's wrist and with surprising ease just flung him around. The Grandpa founder was stunned. He recognized that move from their old battles against monsters. Suddenly, Hitani was hurled right out the window, smashing through the backyard wall, but Hitani landed on his feet before even hitting the ground. Hitani regained his stance and walked back, trying to figure out what just happened. He wondered if that was Aikido. He remembered Kanagi's fight with Midori that afternoon. He noticed Kanagi's massive aura and swordsmanship, but also a strange, peculiar power. Hitani acknowledged his resilience, saying he's even tougher than Haki. Kanagi's patience ran out. So he demanded an answer, asking what he'd done to his mother, who was still inside, twisting in pain as poison spread through her body. Hitani just laughed. He mockingly pointed out that Kanagi didn't seem to get what's going on. Then, with a grin, he tells him the truth. His mother was in the way, so he put her to sleep with some poison. Hitani smirked, adding that if she's lucky, she'll only have minor side effects. Kanagi stayed calm, saying he didn't understand, which made Hitani look at him, confused. Then he asked why they would hurt the family of a potential future comrade. Hitani laughed at the word comrade. He flashed behind him, ready to strike. He barely dodged Hitani's attack, but the relentless assault just kept coming. While attacking, Hitani said he'll never be their comrade. He's just a puppet on their strings. Hini taunts him, saying once his loved ones are hostages, he'll have no choice but to break. He even calls him naive. Before he can react, Hitani stomps on his foot and slashes him, mockingly asking if he was right. He jumps back, a burning pain searing his cheek. As he touches it, he realizes poison is already spreading. Hitani grins. Lifting his fingers, which are now coated with sharp, poison-laced needles, he teases that it's already in his system. Then he reveals his ability. Producing dozens of poisons from his own body, he calls it Phantom Bug's Poison, Deadly Vision. Hini then complains about how inconvenient this whole mission is, saying if he really wanted to, he could just release toxic gas over a 5-kilometer radius. But that's not exactly an option in the middle of a city. He then states the poison will kill him in 1 minute unless he agrees to join their organization. If he joins, Hini will give him the antidote, otherwise he dies. Our hero thinks about how deadly this toxin is. For any normal person, it's a death sentence. Looking down at his hand, though, he calls out to Valentine, the god of medicine, asking if she's in there. The founders look over at Valentine, who seems both confused and surprised. He apologizes for calling on her so suddenly and asks if she can teach him how to neutralize the poison later. She stammers out an agreement. Irritated, Hitani hurls another wave of poison at him, yelling and demanding to know what nonsense he's mumbling about. He quickly dodges it, then explains that the Aikido move he used earlier came from Kuduhuma, the god of hands. The old man inside him is shocked, realizing he copied his move just from seeing it once. Next, he calls on Hin, the 10,000 army slasher, Jaimur Calcus, the blue spear of destruction, and Margaret, the heavenly bow. He explains he studied and memorized all of their abilities from the records. He tells Hitani that the founders he used to worship are now living inside of him. This leaves Hitani completely bewildered. But instead of fear, Hitani feels pure rage. He shouts that he's going to show him what real pain feels like. Hini charges at him, needles at the ready. He leaps away just in time, dodging the attack. Hitani's strike hits a nearby tree, which withers and dies instantly. Hitani doesn't even hesitate. He launches another attack, shouting that if he kneels and begs, he might get an antidote to lessen the pain. He warns him that once the pain consumes him, he'll never go back to normal. His mind will just be lost to madness. But our hero stays silent, just waiting as Hini's hand gets closer. And just as Hitani reaches him, he slides to the side. He then puts his palm right against Hitani's chest and activates Saint Wantok's fist. Hitani coughs up blood from the hit, which even shocks Wantok inside him. The force sends Hitani crashing into a street light. Without a moment's hesitation, he follows up with a kick using Irsen's Feet of Light. This sends Hitani flying a huge distance. Irsen, who's inside him, is stunned by the power, but Hitani still manages to get back up, recovering quickly. In an instant, he's right in front of our hero again, attacking with both hands. He manages to slip through Hitani's attack, breaking a few of his needles. Then he uses the sharp beak Kanagi corners Hitani, hitting him in the stomach before slashing him with Rowan's skill, the dragon's claw. Rowan, watching from inside, is left totally stunned. Haitani grabs him and activates Lalek's flipper, which then starts flinging Haitani around in midair. As he floats, he wonders what's going on. He knows the poison should have clouded Kanagi's judgment and messed with his nervous system, but the guy is still moving strong and unharmed. Kanagi then unleashes the Magus of Truth, Melta Silentius, aiming it right at Haitani. The resulting energy blast completely shocks everyone watching. Hinno turns to the founders, asking if they saw that. He explains that right after defeating Haitani, Kanagi started copying all of his moves, both physical and magical. Hinoi adds that he doesn't care if Kanagi's power comes from the Crest of Nothingness. He just finds the kid incredibly interesting, and the founders agree. Hinoi then suggests they should train Kanagi, certain that he could become the strongest Awakener. Meanwhile, across the city, a group of hooded figures are running and jumping across rooftops. One of them shouts for the others to hurry. He reveals that Nemo's guilds are hunting for Kanagi, so they need to move fast and get him before Nemo's people do. But suddenly, Midori appears right behind him. Are there really that many? Midori asks. The man is completely stunned, but Midori calmly tells him, if there were 15, then you must be the last one. Midori then points a finger at the man's forehead, snaps his head back, and slams him hard onto the building's roof. He contacts Ren using his Raven's call, and she answers instantly, telling him she's already there. She assures him there aren't any other Awakeners nearby, but her next words catch him off guard. Someone else has already been here, Ren says. Midori stays quiet, waiting for her to explain. Ren tells him the intruder was Hitani, an S-rank hunter known for his deadly poison skills. He'd come to find Kanagi, but was completely defeated. Midori's eyes shift to the rooftop where Hitani is lying sprawled out, his mouth hanging open. It makes Midori wonder what on earth happened here. A little later, they arrive at Kage's house. Midori claps his hands together with a huge grin as he starts praising Kanagi. He's genuinely impressed, saying he never expected Kanagi to defeat Haitani. Without pausing, he asks, "Were you exposed to the poison?" Kanagi scratches his cheek and gives a sheepish reply, "My mom and I are both fine." Hin, looking unimpressed, just crosses his arms. He reminds Kanagi, "You wouldn't have survived the night without Valentine's help." As soon as her name is mentioned, Valentine groans, obviously exhausted. But Hin immediately acknowledges her speed, noting that finishing everything in just 5 seconds is seriously impressive. Valentine just shrugs it off, muttering that it wasn't difficult at all, since the poison's creator was right there. It only took a few jabs to get the necessary blood samples and create the antidote. Kanagi, still trying to take it all in, finally asks the one question that had been bugging him. Was Haitani lying when he said he was your comrade? Midori immediately nods, confirming it was a complete lie. He adds that a lot of people use his name for their own selfish gains. With that settled, he turns back to Ren. He asks if she's finished, and right on cue, she appears at his side. And nodded, confirming all the damage was repaired. Kanagi's eyes widened in total disbelief. He looked over at his house. And yep, his window and backyard wall were totally flawless again. Midori then flashed a bright smile and suggested they head inside to discuss Kanagi's future, but Kanagi just stood there, completely frozen. A weird mix of excitement and anxiety washed over him. The next morning, a car was waiting for Kanagi, and his mom was at the gate to see him off. She asked him to double-check if he'd forgotten anything, but Kanagi just insisted he was all set and told her she worried way too much. She couldn't believe her little boy was actually leaving for Midori's. Midori had already promised Kanagi's mom that he would take care of him and forge him into a great hunter. Kanagi was thrilled to hear it, but his mom couldn't shake her worries. Still, she hid her concern as she handed Kanagi his lunch, reminding him to eat since he had skipped breakfast. He didn't really need it, but Kanagi accepted it without putting up a fight. His mom then turned to Midori and asked him straight up, would her son be in danger? Midori didn't hesitate to confirm it. His mother then explained that Kanagi had always had a difficult life, so trusting Midori with her son was a massive leap of faith. Even so, as a mother, she couldn't help but feel worried. Midori, sounding confident, promised her that he would train Kanagi until every single weakness was gone. Hearing this, she finally relented, leaving Kanagi in his care. Once they were in the car, Ren, who was driving, glanced at Midori. She asked if it was really okay to make a promise like that to Kanagi's mom, especially when they don't even know what's going to happen. For a second, worry flickered across Midori's face. He glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing Kanagi's mom still giving him some last-minute advice. She was telling him how to do his laundry and reminding him not to sleep naked or he'd catch a cold. Seeing her genuine concern, a determined look hardened Midori's eyes. He made a silent vow to do his absolute best. Meanwhile, Kanagi was holding back his own emotions as he said his final goodbyes. Right as he was about to get in, his mom called out, reminding him to come home for New Year's. As the car finally pulled away, Midori asked Kanagi if he was all right. Kanagi admitted it took everything he had to control his emotions. Midori just leaned back, telling him to do whatever he felt like, whether that meant eating or just resting. Glancing around, Kanagi noticed the lunchbox his mom packed, sitting neatly beside him. He opened it up, his mom's parting words still echoing in his head. As he lifted the lid, his eyes fell on a little good luck message sitting right on top of the pork cutlet. That simple gesture hit him hard, stirring up all the emotions he'd been fighting. He paused for a moment, thinking about all the love and sacrifice she'd poured into him. A quiet feeling of gratitude filled his chest as he began to eat, even though each bite came with the sharp sting of unshed tears. Ren and Midori, sitting nearby, exchanged a look but said nothing, letting him have this moment to himself as they continued on their journey. When they finally arrived at their destination, Kanagi was stunned. He stared at the impressive anti-prophecy headquarters building. Midori welcomed him, explaining that only a handful of chosen awakeners are ever allowed to enter. The sheer weight of that fact settled over him. For a second, he was just completely overwhelmed, finally realizing what he was about to become a part of. Elsewhere, inside one of the rooms, a man stood by the window. He watches them arrive, his gaze intense. Without even turning, he speaks to someone else in the room, confirming that the new recruits have arrived. A girl with a poker face asks if all this is really about the newcomer. A young man replies that it's pretty rare for them to get a new comrade, but a man standing nearby with his arms crossed looks skeptical. He insists they first need to figure out if the new guy is actually worthy of joining the anti-prophecy. Meanwhile, outside headquarters, our protagonist is momentarily frozen, struggling to take in his new surroundings. Questions are swirling in his mind. What exactly is this anti-prophecy unit? And could it be connected to the Ikehara Guild? Sensing his anxiety, Ren acknowledges that it's confusing and apologizes for not explaining everything sooner. She explains that she couldn't tell his mom the whole story because it's all classified. A top national secret, and those words hit him harder than he expected. As they walked toward the building, Midori suggested they take his luggage to the dorm first. Ren offered to help, but he politely declined, saying he could manage it himself. But just as he was about to move, a sudden voice cut through the air, telling them to wait. This sudden interruption really startled him. He glanced up and saw the young man from earlier standing right above them. Without skipping a beat, the man announced that he'd be the one to explain everything. Then in the very next breath, he lunged forward with a powerful kick, aiming straight for his head. He instinctively raised his arms to block, but the sheer force of the blow shattered the ground beneath his feet. The impact sent a tremor right through him, but he held his ground, bracing himself against the shockwave. The attacker seemed impressed. He acknowledged his resilience and even offered a rare word of praise. Intrigued, our hero paused for a moment before asking who he was. Without missing a beat, the attacker jumped back, landing effortlessly on the ground. He then proudly introduced himself as Hanada Hikataru, a member of the Anti-Prophecy Unit, and his new comrade. This revelation caught him completely by surprise, but there wasn't much time to think. Hanada had been assigned to explain everything, and ready or not, the truth was about to come out. Meanwhile, Midori seemed completely unfazed. He simply asked Ren for some tea. Ren nodded and poured him a cup as the other two continued to spar. Midori watched them calmly, his gaze steady. He asked Hanada why they were fighting if they were comrades. Hanada, still cool as ever, explained it served two purposes: to introduce Kanagi to the Anti-Prophecy Unit and to test his skills. This explanation stuck with Kanagi, leaving him wondering what kind of test this actually was. Without warning, Hanata moved again with swift precision, launching another kick his way. Kanagi reacted instantly. Blocking the strike with both arms, his stance completely unshaken. Even in the middle of the fight, Hanata started explaining the origin of the Anti-Prophecy Unit. Kanagi listened, but he was skeptical. He doubted Hanada would actually give a full explanation while they were still trying to fight. As the exchange continued, Hanada paused for a moment to ask for Kanagi's name before continuing. Without hesitation, he introduced himself as Kanagi Manato. Midori, still leisurely sipping his tea, reflected on how Kanagi had been tested time and again. First the academy, then that guy, and even an S rank. Now he's facing yet another test. Another trial. He turns to Ren, asking if Kanagi is just going to be tested forever. But Ren, cool as ever, says it can't really be helped. I mean, Kanagi was handpicked. Meanwhile, Hanata is still going at it. He's unleashing a barrage of kicks, but Kanagi manages to block every single one. His stamina is holding up. Then, out of nowhere, Hanata asks him, "What's the role of a hunter?" Without missing a beat, Kanagi answers, "A hunter's duty is to eliminate monsters that come out of dimensional cracks." In response, Hanata gives him a thumbs up, confirming he nailed the answer. Then he compares a hunter's work to pest control, a simple but perfect comparison. Then, just as suddenly, Hanata hits the deck and completely changes the subject with another question. He asks Kanagi about the other threats lurking out there, besides the dimensional rifts. This question clearly catches Kanagi by surprise. He hesitates, then asks Hanata to explain what he means by other dangers. Hanata's face gets a little grim as he starts to explain that the world faces threats much bigger than just a few cracks. He mentions some truly terrifying events: the Pandemonium 10,000 Demons Castle from 10 years back and the great outbreak of Kyushu just 5 years ago, and Kanagi instantly recognizes them. They were massive dimensional breaks, catastrophes that left lasting scars on the world, but before he can even process it, Hanata lunges at him. On pure instinct, Kanagi throws his arms up and manages to block. Even so, the sheer force of the blow sends him sliding back. Hanata acknowledges his toughness, praising him for remembering the official story on those past disasters. But he adds that Kanagi will learn the whole truth about them soon enough. Once he starts his training at the academy, right as Kanagi finally regains his balance. His breathing still under control, he has no time to prepare for what's next. Hanata appears above him in a flash, moving with unbelievable speed. Kanagi doesn't even have a moment to think. Hanata's leg is already swinging down in a devastating axe kick. Somehow, Kanagi just barely throws himself aside, managing to dodge the brutal attack. As Hanata's foot smashes into the earth, a nearby tree takes the full force of the impact, splitting perfectly in two. The sheer power of the move leaves Kanagi speechless for a moment. Hanata straightens up, and his entire tone shifts as he continues. Events like the Tower of Malevolence, he says, weren't just simple disasters. From 300 years ago, they were not just random catastrophes, they were full-on invasions, direct assaults from another dimension. Kanagi can hardly believe what he is hearing. He's trying to process the sheer scale of it all. This was not just some old story. It is a present-day threat. Hinata steps in closer, his face completely serious. He admits he doesn't understand why modern awakeners seem to be so much weaker. Weaker than the ones from the Tower era, there are hardly any people left who could match the original founder's power, and that fact clearly frustrates him. Torn between curiosity and dread, Kanagi finally asks the one question on his mind. So what are we supposed to do? Hinata's answer is firm. That's exactly why the anti-prophecy unit exists. He explains that people who can foresee these future threats and predict these massive disasters do not just tell everyone about it. They do not tell the public. That knowledge is only for the elite, the ones strong enough to deal with those dangers, and according to Hinata, those elites are the members of the anti-prophecy unit. Hearing that, Midori and Ren couldn't help but smile proudly. It clicked for Kanagi then. Their whole purpose was to stop these prophecies from ever happening. Hinata then told him that as of today, he was officially one of them. Hinata welcomed him to the team, saying he was the first person who'd managed to block his kicks one after another. Hinata held out his hand as a sign of acceptance, and Kanagi shook it. Midori and Ren applauded, and then Hinata called for the other awakeners, who appeared silently on the roof. Hinata asked what they were doing, but they just stared at him, then vanished, which really surprised Kanagi. Midori said they disappeared like villains, but Hinata just shook his head. He figured they wanted to see how things played out with their own eyes. Hinata then told Midori to leave it to him, and with a nod, Midori took off. After that, Hinata helped Kanagi with his bags and offered to show him to his dorm room, which Kanagi was grateful for. That night, as he got settled, Kanagi couldn't stop thinking about what this organization was. It was all about handling prophecies in their world. He wondered if the founders had faced a similar crisis back in the Tower's era, and if he was now fighting something that had already been predicted. His thoughts made him anxious. But then a voice cut through his worry, saying he'd simply trained. Surprised, he turned to see Hino and the other founders standing right there. He quickly apologized for not speaking to them sooner, but Hinoi told him not to worry. They had already made their decision. As the founders, they decided to train him to become the strongest awakener, just like Midori. With their help, he could become the strongest awakener in history, one of their very own disciples. Kanagi was totally surprised, asking if they seriously wanted him as their disciple. Hinoi nodded, saying yes, but then teased that it would lead to a battle royale between them. Worried, Kanagi begged them not to fight over him. Hinoi explained that's how it had started, but after watching him more closely, the founders had changed their minds. Instead of just using his body for their own selfish reasons, they found training him much more interesting. Hinoi then told him that when Kanagi defeated the poison user, he actually copied all of their moves. He couldn't do them perfectly, of course, but he picked up the basics incredibly fast. Hinoi asked if Kanagi understood what a big deal this was, pointing out it was probably because of his Crest of Nothingness. But what really made him special was his learning speed. Hinoi explained that this one ability was actually stronger than any of the founders' own talents. As Hinoi spoke, Kanagi felt tears welling up in his eyes. He remembered his old trainers' disappointed faces, the ones who said he seemed to have no talent at all. Until now, no one had ever expected a thing from him. It all felt like a dream, especially since he'd been treated like garbage and constantly bullied for failing the hunter's qualification test 3 separate times. He remembered his classmates' laughter, their mocking voices telling him to just give up. His name was often forgotten, lost in the crowd because nobody cared enough to remember it. No one had faith in his future, and he was used to being overlooked. But now, 2 of the most famous figures, Midori and Hinoi, were actually acknowledging him. He couldn't believe it. It honestly made him question if he even deserved this happiness. He had admired them from afar for so long, never dreaming they would actually trust him. Hinoi noticed his reaction, stepping closer with a warm smile and putting a hand on his shoulder. He told him not to get carried away. Then they revealed their actual souls were inside him, mainly when he slept. This meant he could now access a space beyond time and dimension. Knowing this, they laid out his rigorous training plan. Every afternoon, he'd train with the anti-prophecy unit, and then at night, his lessons would continue in his dreams. Peaceful sleep was a thing of the past, but he had already braced himself for the challenge. He accepted their guidance immediately, determined to follow whatever they said. Night passed and morning came. In the bathroom, Hinata was washing his face when our hero walked in. They exchanged greetings, but he still looked completely exhausted. He was clearly wiped out and admitted he hadn't adjusted to the grueling schedule yet. Hinata understood perfectly, remembering his own struggle when he first started at the dorm. But then, something unexpected caught Hinata's eye, a powerful aura coming from him. Curious, Hinata suddenly threw a swift kick without thinking. Yet almost effortlessly, he simply lowered his head, spat out the water in his mouth, and walked away without a backward glance. He dismissed Hinata's little stunt, saying he had no time for games this early in the morning and was heading to the cafeteria. Hinata was just left in disbelief. He realized his attack was faster than yesterday's, but it was dodged so easily. Later in the cafeteria, Hinata spotted a good seat and walked over to a woman who was eating some fruit. Then asked her if they could join her. She gave a curt approval, so Hinata took the chance, sat across from her, and motioned for him to sit down too. Then he recognized her, one of Hinata's comrades from the day before, but she was still cold. She spoke formally, making it obvious she didn't want him there. Still, he greeted her and introduced himself. Her indifference was immediate. She wasn't interested in learning his name, and she definitely didn't plan on remembering it. She even raised her fork, pointed it at him, and declared she'd only learn his name when she decided he was worthy. Until then, training was the only priority. He'd have to join her on a mission to eliminate a prophecy. This one dated all the way back to 1945, when the first prophecy book was found deep in the Antarctic ice, 3,000 meters down. They called it the Book of Doom. Its writing was crude, like a child had scrawled it, but it foretold a catastrophic future. It said that 80 years later, the world would face a devastating attack and a series of apocalyptic disasters. The warning was so serious, everyone took it seriously. Later, while driving, she asked him why he thought the world believed the book's grim predictions. He thought about it for a moment, then looked at her, still not knowing her name. But before he could even ask, she told him introductions weren't necessary at all and just wanted his answer. He figured the prophecies must be accurate. But she reacted instantly, scoffing at his answer and practically questioning his intelligence. She said that if even one prophecy in the Book of Doom came true, the world would end. That revelation left him speechless. As they continued talking, he turned to Hinata, asking how many prophecies were actually in the book. Hinata figured around 200, which just left him completely floored. He couldn't help but think the world was already beyond saving. But Midori quickly reassured him that they'd already stopped almost 180 of those prophecies, which absolutely blew his mind. Still trying to process everything, he went back to asking why the world took the book so seriously. The woman explained that an explorer named Bernard Russell was the one who found the Book of Doom. The second Bernard opened it. The first page read, "Hello, Bernard," along with a very specific timestamp. March 17, 1945, at 11:35 a.m. on a sunny day. The exact moment he discovered it, that kind of creepy accuracy left no room for doubt. Hours later, they reached their destination in Tokyo's Sumida Ward, where an intermediate-level dimensional rift had opened up. As they got closer, guards blocked their way, insisting the area was completely off-limits. But they just ignored the warnings, blowing past them with incredible speed and leaving the guards totally stunned. He hesitated, wondering if this was really okay, but Hinata immediately told him it was fine. The woman then started to lay out the massive crisis they were facing. She explained that huge events like a third world war, the dark side of the moon, or an invasive pandemic, and even floating trees were all classified as emergencies. Out of those, the pandemonium outbreak, which Midori had managed to stop, was an especially nasty one. And while the Book of Doom is pretty well known, it's just one of countless magic books scattered all around the globe. The anti-prophecy unit's entire job is to collect intel, analyze the predictions, and act before disaster strikes. She then walked him through the different threat levels they handled. A rank 3, for example, meant one or more regions getting completely wiped out. A rank 2 was a national-level emergency, while a rank 1 would affect the planet's whole environment. And then there was the special rank, reserved for when the world itself was about to be destroyed. He listened intently, and as he understood the sheer scale of it all, he started to panic. He urgently asked if these kinds of missions were now completely on their shoulders. The woman didn't even blink. She confirmed that, yes, those responsibilities simply came with the job in the anti-prophecy unit. Shortly after, Kisaragi and his team saw them cross the caution line and immediately moved in to confront them. Kisaragi, thinking they were just civilians, warned them to get back, explaining how incredibly dangerous the area was. But she just blew off his concerns, stating that today's prophecy was a rank 3 event. The dimensional crack in front of them might look like an intermediate B rank, but it was actually a much deadlier threat. A rank 3 disaster named Yellow Journal. She was certain the crack would get bigger, and right on cue, it began to widen at a terrifying rate. Kisaragi spun around, his eyes wide with terror as the fissure tore completely open. Then a wave of monsters started pouring out, each one more grotesque than the last. He barked orders at his squad to prepare for battle. But the response, the attack, was instant and brutal. Monsters tore through his forces in moments, mowing them down with almost no resistance. Panic flooded in, and he cursed under his breath when he saw that even B and C rank hunters were struggling to hold their ground. But then his attention was pulled towards something far more dangerous. An immense pressure radiating from a boss-level monster. He watched the newcomers stride forward. Kisaragi tried to stop them again, telling them to stay back. But before he could finish, the woman simply pressed her hand to the ground and cast a spell she called Trismegist. Instantly, spears erupted from the ground, impaling the creatures in one swift, merciless strike. Their bodies collapsed, totally lifeless as blood pooled around them. Hinata launched his own attack then, bursting forward with incredible speed, flowing through the battlefield and knocking down every single enemy in his way with perfectly calculated moves. Kisaragi just watched the whole thing play out, completely speechless. He'd always thought he was a pretty powerful S-rank hunter, but these two were clearly on another level entirely. He just couldn't figure out who on earth they were or where they came from. Then the woman turned to Kisaragi and, without a hint of doubt, ordered him to fall back. As far as she was concerned, he was nothing more than a civilian in this mess. Kisaragi's gaze dropped to her hand, where he spotted an emblem imprinted right on her skin. Recognition suddenly flashed across his face. He realized they weren't here by accident. These were government operatives. Before he could even process what that really meant, a massive hand shot out from the dimensional crack, tearing it open even wider. As the portal expanded, a towering creature stepped through. It was Gilia Alir, a monster way beyond S-rank, looming over them, its monstrous form radiating an overwhelming aura. Without even a moment's hesitation, the woman lunged forward, preparing to land a strike. Kisaragi shouted, warning her against being reckless, but she didn't even listen. Together, they both launched their attack, completely unfazed by the powerful threat in front of them. Hinata quickly began to strike the beastman with a series of kicks, only to realize with a shock that his attacks were having no effect. The monster's anti-physical armor made his strikes useless, forcing him to jump back just as it lunged toward the woman. Without hesitation, she began gathering energy in front of her, preparing to launch a counterattack. But before she could even unleash her spell, Kane suddenly appeared between them. He stopped the beastman's attack with nothing but his bare hand. The impact caused the beastman to explode in a burst of raw energy, stunning everyone watching. Once the dust settled, Hinata recognized the attack immediately. It was a penetration shock. What truly shocked him, though, was that Kane had just taken down an S+ rank monster with one single hit. It dawned on him that Kane's strength had grown exponentially overnight. Even though the woman called out that so much force wasn't necessary, he knew that when you're up against a foe with high physical resistance, attacking from the inside is the most effective method. He'd actually learned this from Wantak, the fist saint who had taught him the very basics of penetration attacks just the night before. After that, Kane turned to the girl and asked for her name, figuring he'd saved her, so he deserved to at least know that much. She seemed excited to tell him. Her name was Akin, but there was no time for that. Hinata spun back to the battlefield, powering up to face the new wave of monsters pouring out of the crack. The woman wasn't fazed at all. She unleashed her own attack, drenching her enemies in liquid mercury, then igniting it in a massive explosion with her Mercurius reject skill. Together they pushed forward, seeing just how right Kane had been. Attacking their enemies from the inside was proving to be far more effective. She was determined to press on, so she signaled Hinata. Without hesitation, they both charged straight for the dimensional crack, while Kisaragi could only watch in total disbelief from behind. He knew the world beyond that crack was completely different, an unknown realm filled with unimaginable dangers. Going inside was just pure madness. Before he could even react, they had already rushed ahead, leaping through the rift without a second thought. Kisaragi was left standing there, surrounded by the lifeless bodies of rank monsters. That's when it hit him, these two were no ordinary fighters. They had to be from that rumored secret organization. The moment they stepped into the dimension, an overwhelming swarm of creatures was waiting for them. Akin quickly took stock of the situation, noting that the monsters were identical to the ones outside, and then raised her hand. With perfect precision, she conjured a storm of mercury spears, instantly impaling the creatures. Kane, still moving, watched her incredible technique and recognized her immense power. He finally understood why she was considered the strongest area of effect fighter in the entire anti-prophecy unit. After they cleared the other enemies, Akin stood before a massive bear monster. But just as she was about to attack, Hinata leaped toward it first. The bear saw him and swung its claws, but Hinata dodged by jumping up onto the roof. He then followed up with a barrage of kicks all over the beast. Kane watched, amazed at how effortlessly Hinata moved, even laughing. But then to his shock, Kane suddenly rushed the bear and unleashed a flurry of kicks just like Hinata had. He even asked if the move looked similar to his own technique. Hinata was taken aback, but he couldn't help but smile in amazement. Once they defeated the monster, they ventured deeper. Akin noticed that the farther they went, the fewer enemies they encountered. They finally reached a huge open space that looked just like an arena. Suddenly, they felt an intense aura pulsing around them, and they knew something was coming. Then, to their shock, a huge, enraged Minotaur warrior monster jumped down right in front of them. This wasn't just any Minotaur, it was a boss-class creature with a triple S rank power level. Hinata and Kane were stunned by how massive it was. But Akin just stood there casually, wondering if this was actually the boss. Then a volley of spears shot out from the portal. Akin yelled at the others to hit it with their strongest attacks, saying she'd handle whatever came next. Hearing her, Hinata started channeling his energy while Kane stood in the background, amazed by both of them. But deep down, he knew it probably wouldn't be enough to take down this beast. When Hinata heard him, he was surprised that Kane doubted their strongest moves, even as they hammered it with a barrage of magic. The beast just swung its massive weapon slammed down, carving a crater and sending shockwaves ripping through the arena. When the dust finally cleared, they stared in shock. The beast was totally unharmed. Despite landing their strongest hits, the group prepared to fight again. As Kanagi prepared to move, he suddenly heard a voice praising Akin's talent. He knew that voice immediately. It was Kalik, the spirit of his founder. Kalik, himself an alchemist, worried that Akin, with her purity, agility, and incredible strength, would just waste all her talent by dying so young in this fight. Kalik told him that Akin had tried her best, but this Minotaur was simply on another level entirely. She had underestimated the monster's physical resistance, which was a full 100%. Kanagi, growing concerned, asked what to do. But Kalik simply laughed. Meanwhile, Hinata and Akin were in big trouble. They were really struggling against the beast, realizing they should have brought a mage. As Akin glanced over at Kanagi, she was taken aback by the bizarre energy radiating from his body. Kanagi had just given Kalik control. Kalik took over, immediately casting his spell, Mercurius, directly onto the monster's legs. The spell instantly froze its lower body solid, which left Akin completely stunned. She was shocked, not just because Kanagi used the same type of ability she did, but because he'd used it in a way that completely immobilized the dungeon boss. Kalik, still in control of Kanagi's body, gave Akin a serious look and called her a fool, scolding her for being so inflexible with her powers. He told her she still needed to learn how to control substances in 3 states to truly call herself an alchemist. As Kalik spoke, he was already acting. He simultaneously filled the Minotaur's entire body with mercury. The moment liquid metal began to seep from the monster's mouth, he cast another spell. A boiling spell. The mercury inside the beast instantly heated up, boiling it from within. Toxic fumes spread through the arena, making it hard for the others to breathe. Akin watched in total amazement, realizing Kalik hadn't used brute force. He'd used extreme temperatures to take down the monster from the inside. Meanwhile, the Minotaur writhed in agony, its body literally cooking from within. While casting the spell, Kalik casually told Kanagi he wanted to make Akin his disciple. Kanagi, though, just brushed it off as a joke. Eventually, the boiling mercury overwhelmed the Minotaur, turning it into a lifeless heap on the ground. And just like that, the mission to beat the boss, which was classified as a level 3 prophecy, ended in victory. Akin watched in disbelief, unable to process what she'd just witnessed. Kanagi had used a skill that should only be possible for an awakener living within a crest. Akin knew he had to be in the same class as Hiko, and yet he'd managed to use alchemy on her level. Still shocked, she demanded to know who Kanagi really was. With a confident smirk, Kanagi reached out his hand and introduced himself. Annoyed but intrigued, Akin reluctantly shook his hand, telling him she would definitely remember him. Hinata was beaming with happiness, seeing Kanagi finally get Akin's recognition. Meanwhile, Kisaragi and his men were still waiting outside. To their absolute shock, the dimensional crack started closing. Just as it was about to seal completely, the trio leaped out just in time. Kanagi asked if the mission was officially over, and they told him it was. Just had to report back to headquarters. As they talked about what to do next, Kisaragi approached, thanking them for saving his team. He promised he wouldn't try to dig into their identities or what happened inside. Akane thanked him for his discretion and suggested he put details about the emblem in his report. That would explain everything to the authorities. As the trio started to leave, Kisaragi offered his help if they ever got into trouble. But Akin turned back, saying they'd probably never meet again and telling him he should go back to his normal life. Hearing this, Kisaragi realized that in the end, they were just civilians. People who lived in a world he could never reach. On May 11th, a red flash streaked through the streets of An Prefecture Village. A guard spots it, but they're completely baffled, unable to tell what it is. Then all of a sudden, a deafening sky-piercing roar rips through the village. Back at Anti-Prophecy HQ, the trio got out of their car, and Akin reminded them they needed to write their report for headquarters. But then Hanada got a message on his phone. They were being called to the lab. That was pretty unusual, especially right after a mission. Curious, they headed over to the Anti-Prophecy HQ lab, where two people were already waiting. One person stood on a stage, while the other was sitting in the stands. The one sitting down then said, in a commanding voice, that Akane took way too long to handle a Rank 3 disaster. Kanagi immediately recognized him. It was the red-haired guy from earlier. Akane, though, was enraged by his condescending tone. She was annoyed he was acting like he was their leader when he wasn't. Hanada quickly stepped in to calm things down, asking what Director Kurihara needed. It turns out the man on the stage was the director himself. Once everyone settled down, he played a video the analysis team sent. The footage showed a glowing, red-hot piece of charcoal, which the director explained was a prophecy grimoire. He explained they'd found it in a volcanic region, and they had been analyzing it ever since. Kanagi wondered if it was even possible to read a grimoire that was in such terrible condition. But the director, adjusting his glasses, revealed they managed to get some info from it using AI and X-ray tech, even though the actual text was still unclear. But what they did manage to decipher was one prophecy that clearly mentioned Japan. Everyone in the room was shocked, especially Akin. This was a completely new prophecy they had never seen before. The director went on to explain that anti-prophecy research was highly advanced, gathering info from across the globe, so finding an unknown prophecy like this was highly unusual. But this situation was different. The red-haired man understood immediately. The four of them had to investigate it. The director praised his insight and said this mission would normally go to their usual members. But they weren't available right now. Hearing that, Kanagi realized this must be why Midori wasn't there when they returned. The director then ordered them to leave right away, promising that more details would come by email. Kanagi was stunned they got another mission so fast, but the red-haired man just told him he would get used to it. Feeling deeply uneasy, Kanagi clenched his fists as a chilling thought sank in. This time, the fate of the entire world might actually be on the line. Suo slammed his hand on the table and announced in a seriously bossy tone that he and his three subordinates would be handling the mission. Akin was clearly annoyed. He was pulling the boss card again. As they left, the director gave them one last warning. He told them to be careful, since they had no idea how dangerous the mission might be. He also reminded them that even if the prophecy began to unfold, they had to wait for the main force before doing anything drastic. In the car, Kanagi felt uneasy about the mission's many unknown dangers. From the driver's seat, Suo suggested they get some sleep, noting that Kanagi was fresh off his first mission, but Akin, full of pride, refused. She snapped that he had no right to give her orders. To her surprise, however, both Hanita and Kanagi accepted his offer and were dozing off in seconds. Akin was determined to stay awake, struggling to fight off sleep. But as the night wore on, her exhaustion finally won and she drifted off too. Sometime later, the car stopped. Akin stirred awake and noticed the vehicle was empty. Alarmed, she scrambled outside, finding the others standing on a cliff, staring down at a glowing light below. What she saw left her in utter disbelief. A gigantic magic circle was sprawled across the ground, its scale far beyond anything they had imagined. Heinda instantly realized how serious the situation was. It was so much worse than they expected. The prophecy was already almost complete. Skeletal figures were emerging from the ground, still encased inside enormous crystals. Their eerie glow cast a menacing light over the whole area. A chill went down their spines as they realized they might already be too late. These skeletons were the 23 residents of the village mentioned in the report. Suo recalled a similar case from the past. 30 years ago, the Wakayama mansion had vanished without a trace, and a dimensional rift nearly tore open. As he explained this, the massive pillar at the center of the magic circle started erupting with bursts of energy. Noticing this, Suo urged them to get a move on. Hainda drew his sword and asked what they should do. Suo simply said they had to stop it. Akin immediately reminded him of the director's orders. They were supposed to wait for instructions, but before they could debate it, they felt an immense aura flare up behind them. When they turned around, they saw Kanagi enveloped in massive energy and ready to throw down. The group instantly realized Kanagi was much stronger than before. Even so, Suo wasn't fazed in the slightest. He just smirked, leaped forward, and told the others to follow his lead. Everyone charged after him, though Akin warned him not to be so reckless. As they raced down toward the magic circle, Hino and the mage suddenly caught a scent on the wind. It was an eerily familiar smell, one they had encountered many times in their lives. And just then the ground began to shake violently, and with an explosive blast, a huge hand shot up from the earth. Hinoi's eyes widened in shock. He now knew exactly what they were smelling. It was the stench of a forbidden technique, the very prophecy written in the Book of Scorching Heat. Hinoi explained that long ago. During the Epsi period, an awakener named Bandu Shajima, who was the leader of the Dark Magus, had committed genocide. The Uniojis eventually took him down, but an entire village got caught in the crossfire. Shajima had collected the souls of blood of the fallen villagers and used it to draw a magic circle, making sure he'd be reincarnated 1,000 years later. His goal was to devour everyone and rule the world as a demon king. Before dying, he left behind a forbidden technique that showed how living beings would be sacrificed for his resurrection. Now, in the present, Shijima has been reincarnated as a boss whose rank nobody knows. His mission is clear: to fulfill the prophecy of scorching heat. He looked down at his hands and scowled, realizing he'd been brought back with far less power than he'd expected. He wondered if there weren't enough sacrifices made for the ritual. As he glanced around, he noted with amusement that even after 1,000 years, the place hadn't changed at all. But his lips curled into a maniacal grin when he spotted the anti-prophecy unit getting closer. He just saw them as more sacrifices for him to take. Channeling his dark arts, he unleashed Plate of Yin, causing a massive explosion right under the charging anti-prophecy unit. Kanagi's alarmed as the blast hits Hinata and Akoni, but they're okay once the dust settles. And then his expression darkens as a dark magic circle appears right under where they landed. It's the Death Realm, a dark art. Hundreds of spirits pour out of the circle, reaching with ghostly hands to grab Hinata and Akin. They both struggle, realizing fast that Shijima is much more skilled than they thought. As Shijima watches his spell work, he suddenly senses a presence behind him. It's Kanagi hitting him with a surprise attack. Shijima dodges with ease, bending and sidestepping without any effort. He smirks, calling Kanagi a total amateur, then casts Plate of Yin right underneath him. The blast goes off, but to Shijima's surprise, Kanagi is unharmed. Kanagi strikes back with his Thunderbolt-hatted skill, but Shijima easily blocks it using his own dark magic. Even though he stopped the attack, Shijima is impressed by Kanagi's skill choice. Out of the smoke, Suo walks up behind Shijima and uses the chrysanthemum spell, sending a flurry of sharp knives flying at him. Shijima is surprised, but easily dodges by leaping into the air. While he's up there, Suo unleashes another spell, showing he already knew Shijima wouldn't be beaten by such a simple skill. Suo slams his weapon down and uses the autumn skill, making knives rain from the sky, but Shijima just smiles, calling it a mere rain of lights. He then morphs his hand into a claw. Suo blocks it, but the recoil is huge. After that block, Shijima realizes Suo is probably the strongest one here. Kanagi, watching from the side, thinks Shijima's power is endless. He's totally different from any enemy they've ever fought before. Shijima himself feels even stronger than the founders. While Kanagi mulls this over, he hears his friends calling for him from behind. He turns and is shocked to see Akane and Haneda getting hit by dark art skills. They manage to escape the attack, and both start charging at Shijima, who is still fighting Suo. As he's fighting them off, Shijima summons 3 skeleton demons to handle Akin and Hanada, who are still rushing him. Handa sees a demon appear right in front of him and he kicks it, but to his surprise, it does absolutely nothing. These monsters' bodies are as tough as the minotaurs they fought before. While Shijima and Suo kept trading blow for blow, one of the skeleton demons planted itself in front of Kanagi, blocking his way. Even mocked Suo, saying his friends wouldn't be coming to help. But right after Shijima said that, Suo slashed him right across the shoulder. "I don't need any help," he snarled, pointing his blade at Shijima. "Stay back, I only rely on my own power." Shima wiped the blood from his wound and started yelling like a madman, screaming he didn't need anyone either and would devour them all. With that, he charged straight for Suo, who barely deflected the attack just inches from his body. As Suo struggled to fend off Shajima's relentless strikes, he heard someone call his name from behind. It was Kanagi, charging right for Shajima. Shajima was shocked to see Kanagi, especially since he'd sent a demon to intercept him. He quickly glanced back, seeing the others still fighting their own demons, but the one sent after Kanagi was sliced clean in 2. While Shajima was still processing this, Kanagi landed a massive punch square in his face, sending him flying across the ground. Even Suo seemed impressed by the strike. Kanagi then suggested they team up to defeat Shajima. Suo froze for a second. He knew Kanagi and Akane hadn't even beaten their opponents, but this guy had, and now he was offering to help him. But Suo's stubborn pride got the better of him. He flatly refused Kanagi's offer, declaring, "I don't need anyone's help. I am more than enough to fight by myself." Kanagi couldn't believe it. But before they could argue, Shijima suddenly closed in. He unleashed his Magaru's breath technique, and a powerful beam blasted straight toward both of them. Suo managed to block it, but Kanagi was sent flying, his body taking the full force of the attack. He slammed into a tree, and his vision began to blur as he started to black out. As he drifted into unconsciousness, he saw the souls of Hinoi and the mage standing right there in front of him. Hinoi explained that he'd fainted, which is why they summoned him into his own mind. Even though his body was bruised, battered, and racked with pain, Kanagi struggled to stand, desperately asking them to send him back. He had to keep fighting, but before they could reply, a deep, authoritative voice echoed through the space, ordering him to stay out of the battle. Meanwhile, back outside, Suo was barely holding on against Shima's relentless assault. Shajima smirked, even praising Suo for thinking just like him, that they didn't need anyone else for their battles. With a wicked grin and that insane urge to devour, Shijima poured his power into his next attack. He slammed down with so much force that Suo's sword snapped in 2. Though stunned, Suo quickly summoned another blade and swung it at Shima. But Shajima dodged it with ease, bending backward with an almost inhuman flexibility. Shajima clearly seemed to be enjoying himself the more Suo struggled. Meanwhile, back in the spiritual plane, Kanagi's spirit watched the battle play out. They all knew Shajima was stronger than anyone else. Hinoi told Kanagi this was far beyond his abilities. And the mage added that Shajima's precision was terrifyingly sharp. If more humans lived in that area, Shajima would have already become a demon king. She warned Kanagi that if Shajima takes his life too, he would only get stronger and unleash hell on civilization. Claimed finding the grimoire was pure chance. That's when Hinoi stepped forward, asking Kanagi to let them take over his body and handle it. But to their absolute surprise, Kanagi just said no. He apologized, but his tone was firm. "This isn't a drill, this is real." He explained he had to overcome this challenge on his own, because he'd have to again in the future. Full of confidence and grit, he looked right at them and asked if they understood. The mage started to argue, but Hinoi just laughed and cut him off. He told Kanagi, "You've already won against us." Then Hinoi clapped a hand on Kanagi's shoulder, reminding him of his vow to surpass the founders. He pushed Kanagi to go on and use everything he'd learned to do things his own way. And that really fired Kanagi up. With a new resolve in his eyes, he turned to face the battlefield, silently asking the founders to watch over him. Without a second's hesitation, he bolted towards the fray where Shijima and Suo were still locked in a fierce battle. Suo was looking bruised and broken. Just as he opened his eyes, Shijima hit him again, sending him soaring through the air. While Suo was still flying, Shijima prepared to land the final blow and finish him for good. But just as Suo braced for the impact, someone caught him in midair. It was Kanagi, grabbing both Suo and his sword. Still in the air, he quickly borrowed Suo's sword, and with one smooth motion, he tossed Suo toward the ground, moving him safely out of Shijima's incoming magic beam. Suo hit the ground hard, and Shijima immediately shifted his focus to Kanagi, who was still airborne. Shijima unleashed another Magatsu's breath right at him, but then he froze in shock. Kanagi was calmly using Hinoi's one-handed sword technique. With intense focus, Kanagi sliced straight through Shijima's breath attack, splitting it cleanly in two. Then, with pinpoint control, he struck Shijima's arm, severing it completely from his body. Shijima was stunned, horrified, and completely speechless. He had no idea what just happened. Trembling with rage, he screamed about who he was. But Kanagi looked completely unfazed and responded coldly that he was the one who would surpass the founders. The mage watching asked Hino if Kanagi could actually beat the Dark Magus. But Hino himself didn't know the answer yet. Still, Hino was sure Kanagi wasn't being reckless. He had a hunch Kanagi might have picked up something new while napping in the car on the way over. A huge smile spread across Hino's face as he wondered if it was a technique that even he couldn't comprehend. Suo was just as stunned watching Kanagi move with such smooth efficiency. Just moments before, he had refused Kanagi's help. And now that same person was saving his life. Meanwhile, Kanagi kept up his relentless assault on Shijima, forcing him to teleport back. Shijima countered with his dark art, Pomegranate, sending a barrage of energy blasts hurtling toward Kanagi. Kanagi tried to dodge, but he quickly realized they were homing in on him. Kanagi leaped around trying to escape, but the blasts just kept following him. Suddenly, he recalled one of the founder's skills. Aftershock, he slammed his foot down, raising a thick stone barrier in front of himself to block the incoming assault. Shijima was surprised by Kanagi's tactics, but he quickly launched more blasts his way. Kanagi answered by using the shattered pieces of stone to form another shield. Then, seeing an opening, Kanagi combined two skills and flashed behind Shijima. But Shijima barely manages to dodge at the last second. He counters immediately, unleashing his plate of yin blast and striking Kanagi. Kanagi takes the blow, but he absorbs most of the impact. Using a floating rock as a springboard, he lunges at Shijima, recalling the lessons from the founders. Shijima dodges again, but the sheer variety of techniques Kanagi uses leaves him completely stunned. Even the founders watching from afar are just as shocked by Kanagi's rapid growth and constant assault. But Shijima is not done yet. With a dark glare, he activates his forbidden art, summoning a massive skeletal monstrosity by fusing skeletons together.